was coming back from a flight yesterday, and I was scrolling through LinkedIn. I came across a post from an advisor declaring that apparently the greatest thing that they could do for clients was to keep costs low. So the post went on and on about the expense ratios of A-share mutual funds, which I didn't really think were around anymore, but maybe they are. But I couldn't help but shake my head a little. It felt like a regurgitation of sorts of Jack Bogle's book about index funds from decades ago. And I couldn't help but be thinking that if it were only that easy, if it were only about finding the lowest cost, then this entire profession would be rather simple. And at first glance, it struck me kind of as naive, not in a dismissive way, but in a way that revealed something deeper, that this advisor didn't seem to understand where real value comes from in our business. It told me more than anything that their confidence in their craft was probably limited. Because if the main argument that you have is cost, I'm struggling to find the problem that you're actually helping a client solve. Because on the surface, of course, people want to pay as little as possible. That's human nature. No one argues with low cost on the surface. It's easy to understand, it's easy to defend, and it's easy to use as a talking point. But the misunderstanding, I think the massive misunderstanding, is where the best outcomes actually come from. And they actually have little to do with cost. They have everything to do with how people approach their investments as time goes along, how they struggle, how often they make decisions under pressure that run counter to their own success, and how irrational, fearful, or on the other end, overconfident they become when left to their own devices. And that advisor on LinkedIn wasn't talking about any of that. He was just talking about cost. And here's what this advisor and perhaps so many investors often get wrong, in my humble opinion. They confuse temporary decline with permanent loss. They open their statement one day in the middle of a 25% decline or drawdown, and they feel sick. Their anxiety spikes. They read headlines about recession or war or politics or national debt, you name it. Maybe they replay comments from their brother-in-law at Thanksgiving. And suddenly the question becomes, how do I stop the bleeding? Should I go to cash? Is this time different? In that moment, that emotional, highly charged moment, what the heck does cost have to do with anything? Is the issue in that moment that they may have paid 1% more than someone else? Or is the issue that they may act on their own worst impulses and perhaps permanently alter their future? Now, you and I both know the answer. One wrong decision at the wrong time can erase more wealth than a lifetime of fees ever could. But again, cost is easy. Cost is quantifiable. Cost doesn't really ask anything of you, at least emotionally. But behavior does, right? Decision-making does. Self-awareness does. Humility does. Talking about cost never forces someone to confront their own tendencies toward panic or fear or greed, indecision. But behavior does. Talking about behavior does. And most people avoid that conversation, right? It's less tangible. not tangible at all. Here's an example, maybe a good one. My wife, and by extension me, we don't really drink soda, except every once in a while, one particular soda, a fountain Diet Coke, and not any fountain Diet Coke, but a fountain Diet Coke from Chick-fil-A. So we'll be out shopping, maybe the kids are with us, always with us, and we might stop on a Saturday at Chick-fil-A, and there's nothing like that fountain Diet Coke, particularly at Chick-fil-A. It's an indulgence. We both know it. Now, could I buy that Diet Coke by the case at Costco for far less per ounce than Chick-fil-A? Of course, but that product, while the same in a lot of ways, does not feel the same. The experience is different. The perception is different. And I will go to my grave maintaining that the taste is different. Nobody wants to be told necessarily that they overpay for something. Cost is concrete, but value, especially the kind that affects your life and decades down the road, well, that's intangible. It's nuanced. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of folks to examine. Which brings up a really good question, in my opinion, about where does real value actually come from? And I wrote about this a few years back, I think 3 or 4 years back. And imagine a couple in their 50s and coming into your office for help. And they're anxious, they're uncertain, perhaps a little overwhelmed by the complexity of, say, the next 4 decades of their financial life. They feel disorganized. And they're imagining this massive undertaking that they're going to have to go through with a financial advisor. They believe that the work is the building of the plan. And little do they know that you and I can build a plan covering 3 to 4 decades in less than an hour. Literally less than an hour. Does the value stop there? Is our cost simply for filling out forms and constructing the equivalent of a spreadsheet? Now, of course not. The plan is not the value. The protection is. Because after that hour is over, conceivably in their lifetimes, there's 39 years, 7 months, 362 days, whatever, 23 hours left. And that is where the real work occurs. That's where the real work happens. I'm thinking right now, off the top of my head, a client that we brought in years ago, about 10 years ago, Fred in his mid-50s. And his kids at the time were heading to college. Retirement was on the horizon. He was also uncertain, busy, overwhelmed. He and his wife did everything right. They accepted the plan. They have followed the strategy to a T over the last 10 years. They've, of course, invested properly. And yet, over the years, I've had many conversations with Fred over time periods of high inflation, of global conflict, war, debt, pandemic, various elections, market corrections and declines, bear markets. Every one of those events had the opportunity, and sometimes did, create fear, doubt, maybe a little bit of panic at times, however temporary. And every one of those moments had the potential to derail their future. But he stayed the course, not because of cost or lack of cost, but because of coaching, because of intervention and not indexing, because of behavior management and not basis points. And despite the withdrawals for college, and despite how many bear markets have we seen over the past just 4 or 5 years? 5 years. Despite every fear he's expressed, in whatever has happened, his portfolio today sits roughly $1 million higher than where it started, despite all those withdrawals along the way. Not because his plan was brilliant, not because the cost was low, but because he didn't make that one mistake that could have cost him everything. And simply stated, that's the value. That's the real job. People come to advisors with problems they often don't know they have, or problems that they believe they have under control until life shows them otherwise. And the real job of the financial advisor is this: we solve those sometimes invisible or invisible to them obstacles standing between them and their most cherished financial outcomes. Sounds familiar, right? Seems to be a theme every Monday, and probably should be every financial conversation we're having, because it's not the spreadsheets, it's not the cost comparisons, it's not the perfect allocation between investment or asset classes. We solve the human problems, the emotional ones, the behavioral ones, the ones that really threaten to destroy the decades of disciplined investing in a single moment of fear. And if every advisor and client understood that, we wouldn't be having a cost conversation at all. So, to the advisor on LinkedIn, or for any conversation you have with folks about cost, if low cost is your value proposition, then you're not solving the problem that actually determines the outcome. So find the courage to articulate and practice what is the real value, because investors, your clients, desperately need it, even if they don't have the words for it, even if they don't truly understand the nature of the problem that exists for them. And knowing that and practicing that, that's what makes your worth multiples of the cost that you charge. And that's why this time is never different. Everybody be relentless. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.